Thanam prapyasi shashvatam. So given the verse is not on the board today, you don't have to repeat the verse. So the translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O scion of Bharata, surrender unto Him utterly. By His grace, you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. Purport. A living entity should therefore surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's hearts, and that will relieve him from all kinds of miseries of this material existence. By such surrender, not only will one be released from all miseries in this life, but at the end, he will reach the Supreme God. The transcendental world is described in the Vedic literature, Rig Veda, as Tad Vishno Paramam Padam. Since all creation is the kingdom of God, everything material is actually spiritual. But Paramam Padam specifically refers to the eternal abode, which is called the spiritual sky or Vaikuntha. In the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it is stated, Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishtaha. The Lord is situated in everyone's heart. So this recommendation that one should surrender onto the super soul sitting within means that one should surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Krishna has already been accepted by Arjuna as the Supreme. He was accepted in the 10th chapter as Param Brahma Param Dhama. Arjuna has accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Supreme Abode of all living entities. Not only because of his personal experience, but also because of evidence of great authorities like Narada, Asita, Devala and Vyasa. So I'll just recite Mangalacharan and continue. Om Ajnanatimmirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Rahunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishmanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Guru Vaishnav Bhagwan Tine Smarane Hoye Vigna Vinashan Anayashe Hoye Nija Vanchita Puran Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamniti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashat Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this verse, how many of you are here for the first time? Anyone here for, okay, first time? Oh, quite a few people here for the first time. Okay, very well, welcome. Today we are discussing from Bhagavad Gita. We are discussing from one of the last few verses of Bhagavad Gita, actually. So Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters, and we're discussing from the 18th chapter. And it's one of the last few verses. So here Krishna, after speaking on so many different topics about yoga, about jnana, about bhakti, etc., at the end he says, Tam eva sharanam gacha sarva bhavena bharatam. He says that ultimately the conclusion of the whole Bhagavad Gita is that one should surrender unto the Supreme Lord. And that is what Krishna is saying. He's saying, Tam eva sharanam gacha. You should take sharana. You should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now you may wonder, well, if that was the conclusion, then why was that not presented in the beginning? You know, like we have discussed on so many different topics. In second chapter of Bhagavad Gita is known as Sankhya Yoga. It's discussing like what is the soul, what is material world, etc. Third chapter is Karma Yoga. It's talking about how to perform action in this world. Fourth action is Jnana, transcendental knowledge. So it's talking about knowledge. Sixth chapter is Dhyana Yoga, how to perform Ashtanga Yoga, all of these things. So all of these things are there. And then at the end, Krishna is saying, you should ultimately surrender unto me. So why did Krishna not present this knowledge in the beginning? Why did Krishna not say to Arjuna that, you should just surrender unto me? Well, the reason is that we generally as human beings, well, this whole Bhagavad Gita was actually spoken for us. If we are going to surrender onto something, or if we are going to surrender onto someone, We need to have good faith and good confidence that the person whom we are surrendering onto is capable of accepting our surrender. What's the point of surrendering onto someone when that person is not able to protect you? So that is why Krishna, through the whole Bhagavad Gita, he's trying to prove to Arjuna that he is the only one who is worthy of taking shelter. And that is why Krishna speaks on multiple different topics. And at the end, the conclusion comes that we have to surrender onto Krishna. And this is accepted by all acharyas. It's accepted, if you read commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, even Shankaracharya accepts this. So Shankaracharya at the end, he comments that yes, ultimately one should take shelter of Vishnu, or one should take shelter of Krishna, because Krishna is the only one who can give liberation. One of the names of Krishna is Mukunda. Does anyone know what Mukunda means? Mukunda. Mukunda. Da means to give. So like Yashoda is there. Yashoda. Da means give. Yash means fame. So the one who gives fame to Krishna is known as Yashoda. Like that, Mukunda. Da means to give. And Muk, the word Muk actually refers to moksha. So Krishna is the only one who can give moksha. That is why the name of Krishna is known as Mukunda. So Krishna is the only one who can give moksha, or Krishna is the only one who can give liberation, is confirmed by all acharyas. It's confirmed by Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Vishnu Swami, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jiva Goswami, Baladev Vidyabhushan. I can list heaps of scholars. All of them have ultimately come to the conclusion that we should surrender onto Krishna. Now, how do we surrender onto Krishna, and why should we surrender onto Krishna? So here there are two reasons that are given that we should surrender onto Krishna. The reasons are given. So, I mean, like you may ask, let's say you go to some shop, and then over there someone is trying to sell you an object, and then he's demanding, that you pay your whole bank balance towards buying this one item. Now you would want to know that, firstly you would want to know whether it's worth spending your whole bank balance on this particular item. Let's say there is some, let's say you go to some Prada shop, okay, like I don't know, nowadays people go to Prada. So let's say you go to Prada, and in Prada there is one very nice diamond ring. Now let's say they ask you for, let's say, I don't know, like $100,000 for that diamond ring. Now will you pay $100,000 for that ring? Maybe, maybe not. You will want to know what is it that makes this ring $100,000. You will want to see whether the diamond ring is worth it. So similarly, it's exactly the same case here. So Krishna is saying that if you are going to surrender onto me, I'm going to give you two reasons why you should surrender onto me. The first one Krishna says is Tat Prasadat Param Shantim. Krishna says that if you surrender onto me, one of the effects or one of the results of surrendering onto me is that you will attain eternal peace. Eternal peace. Now if you really think about it, we in this material world, we are looking for peace. Like regardless of how many activities we're engaged in, ultimately we are bothered by many things which are going on in our mind. Like it's described in Bhagavad Gita that there are three different types of people. There are people in the mode of ignorance, there are people in the mode of passion, and there are people in the mode of goodness. In Hindi, it's known as Sattvagun, Rajasgun, and Tamasgun. So there are people in all of these three modes. So there are people so let's start with the people in the mode of ignorance, which comprises of at least 80% of our society nowadays. So these kinds of people, whenever they encounter any problem, or whenever they have, like all you have to do is just step out on Surface Paradise. You will see there are so many homeless people. There are people who are they're engaged in taking drugs. They are drinking alcohol. They are completely like passed out. Some of them we see in the hospital. They come in after waking up. They've been sleeping or they've been passed out for an entire day. And then they come to the hospital like completely dehydrated and like completely disoriented. They have no idea what's happening. So these kinds of people, they have absolutely no sense of, purpose, you could say. They have no sense of understanding that life is much more than using these substances. But these people, they heavily engage in these things. And nowadays it's seen that, whenever people encounter any kind of stress, what's the first thing they do? Like on Friday evening, you have drinks. Like that's why we have, the weekday, you have 5 days. And then on Friday, each workplace will organize Friday evening drinks. You go to the bar and then you drink and then you try to forget the whole week. You've worked so hard and then you try to drink to forget everything. So why are they doing that? The reason they're doing this is because they know they're working hard and they know that they're engaged in lots of stressful activities. So when people encounter lots of stress, One of the ways they let it out is through substances, by drinking, by alcohol, by doing all these things. So these kinds of people are described to be in the mode of ignorance, because when they drink or when they engage in substances, they lose their natural frame of mind, they lose their natural consciousness, because of which they are not able to think properly, and they're sometimes passed out for so many days. Then it is described that, okay, these are some kinds of people. Then there is a second kind of people who are known as the people in the mode of passion. So these are known as the Rajasic people. What do these kinds of people do? These kinds of people make more and more endeavors. They're not satisfied with what they have. So let's say at the end of the work week, they look at their roster and they see, not roster, they look at their board and then they see that, I've made these many sales, for example. They become more and more agitated. How can I increase my sales next week? So then they go home, they start making plans. In their mind, they're not satisfied. They want to somehow or the other, they want to increase their sales. So that may be one thing. The second thing may be that, he received some praise from someone at work. So then he will think, okay, how can I make sure that my glory increases so that I can climb up onto the corporate ladder? Then the third one might be that, okay, well, someone else has done better than me. How can I do better than the other person? Like this competitive mentality is there. And then he may make plans of how to either do better than the other person, or worse than that, he may make plans for how to make sure that the other person does worse than him. So people make all these kinds of plans to make sure that, someone else does worse than you. So all these kinds of things are there also. So these kinds of people are known as people who are in the mode of passion, or people in Rajas Guna. So they don't just want to forget everything, they want to do more and more, or they want to engage in more and more activity. Why? Because internally they're not satisfied, or internally they're so troubled, like their heart is eating them from the inside, that they have to rise above everyone else. And only when they rise above everyone else can they be satisfied, or only then they can be peaceful. That's what they think. But theoretically that may not be possible, because there can only be one person at the top, and even that one person who's at the top may not remain at the top forever. Like we see the richest person in the world, he remains at the top for some period of time. After that he drops. Like I remember when I was young, it was Bill Gates who was at the top. And then now after that, it's someone else. It was the lead, owner of Amazon, I heard. He was at the top. So these kinds of things change. But if we become too attached to these things, then it causes distress in our heart also. So you can see there is no peace in these kinds of things. So the only peace can come when a person is situated in the mode of goodness, or in the mode of sattva guna. So when a person is situated in the mode of goodness, one is able to see through the eyes of knowledge. So one is able to see that actually I am a soul, I am not the body. All of these designations I have, all of this money that I'm receiving, all of the position that I have in society is ultimately dependent on my karma. Whatever karma I have done in the past, I will have to bear the consequences of my karma in the past. If I've done good karma in the past, then I will get a good position in society. If I haven't, then it's going to go down. But he realizes that nothing is ultimately fixed, and these things keep changing with bodies. Like for example, in this body I am born as a human being, but in my next body I may be born as an animal. In my next body I may be even born as a plant. So then what is the use of all of this designation? People want to leave behind a legacy. But what's the point of your legacy if you're not there to witness your own legacy? So that is why it's important to consider that we need to see through the eyes of knowledge. And that is why this Bhagavad Gita was spoken. That is why the first topic that Krishna discusses in Bhagavad Gita is Sankhya Yoga, where he explains that you are not the body and you are actually the soul. Because then you will start to think in the framework of being the soul. Because the soul is not Indian, the soul is not American, the soul is not a boy, the soul is not a girl, the soul is not 15 years old, the soul is not 200 years old like a tortoise. The soul is eternal. The soul has nothing to do with the body. The soul is what witnesses the body. So like for example, I'll give you an example. Like let's say you look at an infant, like an infant who's born, let's say, who's 1 day old, right? Now when this infant grows up, he becomes into a young girl, let's say, or she becomes into a young girl. And then after she becomes a young girl, she becomes a woman. Then she has children of her own. And then she eventually ages, and then she becomes very old. And then now she is close to her deathbed. What is it that stays the same between that infant who was there at 1 day old and the woman who's there at 90 years old. What is it along these two time frames? What is it that remains the same? Her body has changed completely, because when she was an infant, her body was completely different. And now when she's old, her body is completely different now. So the body has changed completely. Her memories may or may not remain, because we know that as we grow old, like up to 5 years of age, you don't form any memories. And then after, like, let's say 70, 80, you slowly start losing all of your memories also. So we lose all of our memories as well. So then the question is, what is it that remains same from day 1 to 90 years of age? The thing that remains the same is the witness in the body, which is the soul. So the Atma remains the same. And this Atma, the witness, because it remains the same, after this body is destroyed, it takes up another body. So one who looks at this changing world through the eyes of knowledge is able to understand that actually there is nothing fixed in this material world. This whole world keeps changing. So such a person remains, it's explained, this person remains sober. Such a person remains dhira in this material world, and he does not become excessively anxious whenever things are changing, or he does not lament too much if something does not go according to his plans. So such a person can only remain peaceful. Like all of you know the story of Buddha, for example. Like Buddha was, like Gautama Buddha was there, and about 600 BC, I think, yeah, he was there. And he was quite troubled by seeing a young man who was caught up with disease. Then he saw an old man, then he saw a person dying, and he became quite distressed. And that's when he went into meditation. And after he came out of his meditation, he understood the same thing. He saw that actually the soul changes bodies, just like, we change our clothes. Like when you wake up in the morning and take a shower, then you wear different clothes. We don't cry, oh no, I'm going to abandon my clothes. Oh no, what's going to happen to my clothes? No, we don't cry, because we know that once we abandon these clothes, we'll wear new clothes. And then in the evening, you come home, you take a shower, and then you may wear new clothes again, and you'll abandon your old clothes again. So it's quite natural for us to, change our clothes. So similarly, the soul also changes bodies. So that is why there is no need to lament. If, you're abandoning one body and then you have to take up another body, there is no need to lament. Why? Because it's been going on for a long time. We've been doing this for a very long time. And if we don't fix things, this will continue for a long time also. So the intelligent person then realizes that, why am I stuck in all of this? Why am I doing all of this? Why am I changing my clothes? Why am I changing my bodies over and over again? Is there a way out of this? Because every time you change your body, there's so much suffering. Like when you grow old, I'm sure many of us can experience this. Like first thing that starts to happen is you start feeling your back. And then you start feeling your knees. And then slowly, you'll start feeling your hips. And then slowly, you'll start feeling parts in your body that you never knew even existed. So even this is there. So like when you're young, you can play around. You might be like, oh yeah, I'm invincible, etc. But then slowly, we realize that, this body is extremely painful. So then when we grow old, that's a problem. Then when we grow old, we also get diseases. Disease is another thing. So janma, mrityu, jara, vyadhi. So we start getting diseases. And we start getting diseases that again we have never even thought that we would get when we were young. And then the biggest thing that everyone fears is death. We are afraid that we are going to die. And that is quite distressing, because at the time of death, all of our attachments, whatever we are attached to, is taken away from us. Forcibly, even though we don't want to part away from them, but forcibly we are forced to separate from them. And that's quite distressing. So the person who is intelligent will think, well, is there a way out of this? Is there something that I can do to stop this cycle? I've been doing this for thousands and thousands or millions of lifetimes already. When can I put a stop to this? So then the intelligent person asks a question. And that is why the Bhagavad Gita is spoken. So the Bhagavad Gita is spoken for a person who wants to get out of this material existence. But to understand that, firstly, we have to understand that we are suffering. Because many of the times we don't even understand that we are suffering. So if we understand that we are suffering and we understand that there may be a way out of this, then we ask the right questions. And then this verse is spoken. So this verse is the conclusion, you could say, of Bhagavad Gita. One of the verses, actually there's a few verses which come here. So from 62 to 66, where Krishna is summarizing this surrendering process. So Krishna is saying that tam eva sharanam gacha sarva bhavena bharata, which means that now after understanding that you are suffering and after understanding what to do, what not to do, you should take shelter of the Supreme Lord. So the intelligent person, he realizes that he is not under control. He realizes that he can't do anything for all of this suffering that he's going through. So what does he do? He takes shelter of the Supreme Lord. Why? Because he knows that the only person who can help him after Krishna has explained this Bhagavad Gita is the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord can help us firstly understand where we are, understand our position, and also help us get out of this position also. So the intelligent person endeavors to surrender onto the Supreme Lord. Then, let's say, like you surrender onto the Supreme Lord, then it is explained that you get eternal peace. You get Tat Prasada Param Shantim. Param means you get ultimate peace. Ultimate peace. Why do you get ultimate peace when you surrender onto Krishna? An analogy is given actually. So if you think about it in this way, like when you look at kids, when you look at, let's say, a 2 or 3 year old kid, have you ever seen 2 or 3 year old kids having anxiety or depression? No, we never see kids having anxiety or depression. Why? Because they are completely surrendered. Can you not play, please? Yeah. So the reason they're not, they don't have anxiety or depression is because they have completely surrendered onto their parents. Because they have complete faith in their parents, they are completely convinced that whatever happens to me, regardless, my parents will look after me. My parents are there, they are my ultimate protectors. Even though he doesn't know that his parents are limited, but at least in his mind, he thinks that, my parents will always be there to protect me. So such a person will never go into anxiety or any distress. Anything happens, with the flick of a hat, he will run back to his parents. So similarly, the devotee is like that. So the intelligent person also realizes that ultimately, I am under the control of the Supreme Lord. So whatever happens, he turns to God and he turns to Krishna and says that, okay, well, I'm having this problem and, Krishna, please support me and please maintain me and please keep me in your shelter. So then a devotee is also not bewildered, and such a person is also not under any kind of stress. He understands that, Krishna will maintain him. He understands that Krishna will protect him at every circumstance. And if it appears that Krishna is not protecting him, that also is actually Krishna's protection. Now that may be a bit difficult to understand, and that requires some practice and some insight to see how Krishna is apparent when apparently it looks like Krishna is not protecting, actually he is protecting. And that's when people become more and more devoted to God and they leave more and more in God's hands. That is why it is said, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, Srila Prabhupada's guru used to say, the more we leave things in Krishna's hands, the more we will see Krishna's hand in everything. It's quite a profound saying. I'll repeat that again. He says, the more you leave things in God's hands, the more you will see God's hand in everything. The more we try to control things, the more we will not see God everywhere. We will only see God if we leave everything in God's hands. So ultimately, we have to take shelter of the Lord, and that way we can get eternal peace. Because we will be free from anxiety, because we know that God will ultimately protect us and God will maintain us. So then we are not worried about maintaining and protecting ourselves. Like, oh, what will happen to me at the time of death? Will I die a painful death or a painless death, etc. We are not worried because we have taken shelter of God and God will do whatever is best for us. So we are not worried about that. So that is the first thing. So tat prasadat paramam shantim. Next one is sthanam prapyasi shashvatam. Now this may be a leap of faith, because what Krishna is saying is ultimately they attain the Shashvata Sthana. Shashvata Sthana means that place which is eternal. Sthana means place, Shashvata means one which is not destroyed. So he says that basically you will go to Vaikuntha, Krishna is saying. So what is Vaikuntha? Vaikuntha, the name itself means, Kuntha means anxieties and Vai means absence. So Vaikuntha means that there is an absence of anxieties. It's a place where there is absolutely no anxiety. So what is Vaikuntha like? That Krishna has explained in some of the previous chapters also. But basically, if you want to understand what Vaikuntha is like, over there, there is no suffering. A person does not get old. A person does not have disease. There is no death there whatsoever at all. Over there, there are millions and millions of desire trees, where desire trees are basically like you desire something from a tree and you can get it. So it's kind of like that, there are wish-fulfilling cows, also it's described. Like Surabhi cows are described, Kamadhenu cows. So these cows can fulfill whatever desire you have. Let's say you have a desire to eat rasgulla, for example. You can take that rasgulla from a cow and that cow will provide it to you. You take that, you offer it to Krishna, make sure Krishna is satisfied, and then you can have that as your bhoga. You can have that as your prasadam. So Vaikuntha is a place like that. Vaikuntha is a place where Krishna, or Supreme Personality of Godhead, is personally present. So where you can imagine, wherever Krishna is present, over there cannot be any anxiety. Over there will only be happiness. Like I'm sure all of you would have heard about the pastimes of Krishna when he was in Vrindavan or when he was in Gokul. All of the Vrajvasis were surrounding him and all of the Vrajvasis were engaged in loving pastimes with him. Like the cowherd boys were playing with him. They were eating food with him. And they would jump on each other's back and they would run around and they would play with the animals, they would play with the cows. Absolutely no anxiety at all. And then Krishna's parents were there. So Nand Baba, Yashoda were there. And many of the elder Gopas and Gopis in Vrindavan were there who were just like Krishna's parents. And they would just be looking at Krishna and making sure, oh, has Krishna eaten today? Or let's make sure Krishna wears nice clothes today. Let's make sure we decorate his face so nicely. So then it's described that, Mother Yashoda, when Krishna wakes up in the morning, the first thing she does is that she brings some face paint and she paints very nice dots on his face also. So, you can enjoy with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You can enjoy all of these pastimes. Like in the material world, when you do this with your kids, like your kids will grow up eventually. But in the spiritual world, you don't have this influence of time. So Krishna always remains the same age. So you can keep doing this pastime eternally, forever. And it's described that it is Satchid Ananda. Satchid Ananda means that there is knowledge, there is eternity, and it's so blissful. And this bliss keeps increasing day by day. So the same activity you do, like in this material world, when we do some activity, with 1 day passing, 2 days passing, 3 days passing, we get bored of that activity. Like I remember when we were young, we would get some new songs, like from movies. Like let's say some movie was released and then the radio would play songs from that movie. So first day you would listen, oh wow, this song is so good. Second day you'd be like, oh yeah, it's good. Third day you'd be like, oh yeah, it's the same song. Fourth day you're like, arey, can we please change the channel? I don't want to hear this again. So in the material world, it's like this. Like whatever activity we do, eventually we get bored of it and then eventually we start hating it. But in the spiritual world, it's not like that. Spiritual world, it's exactly the opposite. Whatever activity you do, the more you keep doing it, the more and more you keep relishing it. Because why? Because the spiritual world is an exact carbon copy, but opposite of this material world. So whatever happens in this material world, similar things happen in the spiritual world, but the effect is exactly the opposite. So it's an interesting subject matter to discuss. We won't have time to discuss the whole of the spiritual world now, but it suffices to say that if I give you a description of Vrindavan, you will be mesmerized by how it is. Like it is explained that when you see the river Yamuna in the spiritual world, the river Yamuna, on the banks of the river Yamuna, it is lined by heaps of diamonds. And then the sand which is there next to the Yamuna is lined by heaps of rubies. And then on the trees which are next to the Yamuna, there are emeralds and sapphires in the form of flowers, in the forms of leaves. This is how beautiful the land of Vrindavan is. The sun never sets there. The sun is always there. Srila Prabhupada described that there is snow there also, but the snow is not painful. Like I don't know how many of you here have lived in snowy places, but when you go to a snowy place, the first day it's so good, like, oh wow, I'm seeing snow. 1 or 2 days later, your fingers start biting you because it's so cold. And you're like, oh my God, I just want to get out of here. But in the spiritual world, the snow is so fluffy and it's so peaceful, like it brings peace to you. Like this, the spiritual world is there. So Krishna is saying that, if you surrender unto me, you will get these two things. One, within this life itself, you will get peace. Second thing is, after this life, you will go to Vaikuntha. You will go to the spiritual world. So now one may ask, okay, well, how do we surrender to Krishna? Okay, you might be convinced after today that, yes, I'm going to make it my life's mission, that I'm going to surrender on to Krishna. Well, you don't need to make it your life's mission. You can decide now. Here and there, you can, like here itself, you can decide, I want to surrender to Krishna. So then how do we surrender on to Krishna? Well, there are few ways, but there are 3 very important ways that we can surrender to Krishna. And that is known as the ABC formula. How many of you have heard of the ABC formula? It's explained by Srila Prabhupada. So ABC, very easy to remember. You don't have to like remember complex things. But A is association. Association means Sangha, making sure that we associate with devotees. So I'm sure all of you have come here for listening to Bhagavad Gita. Keep doing this regularly. This is good because in this world we have all kinds of association. You could go to the pub, you could go to the bar, you could have gone anywhere. But all of you are very pious souls, so you decided to come here and listen to Bhagavad Gita. So that is very good. By this, we are showing that we want to use our time for Krishna, and Krishna appreciates that. And that is one form of surrender, by associating with the sadhus, by associating with devotees. A. Then B is what? Any idea? B is books. Books means what? Bhagavad Gita. If we don't have Bhagavad Gita, we should take Bhagavad Gita and we should read Bhagavad Gita. It's not that big of a book. It's only 700 verses. So if you read 2 verses every day, you can complete the whole Bhagavad Gita in 1 year, actually. So it's not that big of a book. If you want to read more, there's more books also, but you can start with Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is the most basic and most philosophical book. I mean, we so-called Hindus, we haven't read our own Bhagavad Gita, but the Westerners have read Bhagavad Gita. Like if you look at in the 1940s, like all the scientists at that time, Schrodinger, how many of you have watched the movie Oppenheimer? The guy who made the atom bomb. Well, he kind of invented the atom bomb, but he was actually a physicist. So the atom bomb came as a consequence, side effect of his research, but actually he was a physicist. And he read Bhagavad Gita also. And he, in fact, when the atom bomb exploded, he quoted the Bhagavad Gita. He knew the Bhagavad Gita inside out. To be able to quote a verse from the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, you need to have read the Bhagavad Gita inside out. So he had read Bhagavad Gita inside out, and he was able to quote a very relevant verse at that time. So these Western people, the Western scientists, they are able to appreciate Bhagavad Gita, but we are not able to appreciate Bhagavad Gita. So it is important for us to read Bhagavad Gita, especially for those of us who have come from an Indian subcontinent background. At least we should read Bhagavad Gita once. So A, B, and C. C is the last one. C is chanting. So if we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We were chanting in the beginning of the program also, but then it is recommended that we also chant on our beads. We generally chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra on our beads 108 times. So that comprises 1 round, and that takes about 7 minutes to chant. If we can take out 7 minutes from our daily schedule and just chant the name of Krishna for 1 round at least, that shows Krishna that we care about him and we are chanting his name. It is actually, there's heaps of glories about chanting the holy name also. One of the glories of chanting the holy name, which is relevant to this verse, is that whatever you hear in class, for example, it all consolidates at that time. You're able to consolidate everything and it will all start making sense. Like, when we were in university, we were told that, whenever you attend a lecture during the day, you should go and synthesize that same lecture in the evening. You should go and revise that same lecture. So that is similar to chanting. Like whatever you have heard, ultimately it all condenses when we are chanting the holy name of the Lord. That is one of the effects of chanting of the holy name. So if you don't have Bhagavad Gita, please take one Bhagavad Gita from us today. We have Bhagavad Gita in all different languages. And it's only a nominal donation of $10. The cost of printing Bhagavad Gita itself is $7. So we're only charging you like $3 extra, which again, half of that goes to shipping also. So we only make like $1.50 of profit. So you can see we're pretty much just giving it to you at cost price. So please take one Bhagavad Gita. Because the reason is we're not interested in making money. We're more interested that people read Bhagavad Gita and try to apply it in their lives and make it better. Because there are enough people that are out there that are trying to take your money for all kinds of things. And we don't want to become one of them. So we just want people to make sure that they read Bhagavad Gita and they make their life successful. So we have Bhagavad Gita in English, in Hindi, in Telugu, Tamil, all languages. We have Bangla. We even have in Chinese, if you want to read in Chinese. I don't know. It doesn't look like anyone wants to read in Chinese, but just giving you the option that it's there. We have Bhagavad Gita in all different languages. So having said that, I'll finish there. If anyone has any questions, any comments, or anything you'd like to share, we can discuss that now. Yes?
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
Very genuine question.
Yeah, sure.
But I just want to understand, you said that by And Lord Krishna asks us to renounce material things, surrender to Him to be able to get to the spiritual place. Is that correct?
Kind of, yes.
Yeah. So He describes the spiritual place in a way where it's got rubies and emeralds and gold and everything, diamonds. Then how does it relate to giving up the material things to go to the spiritual life and get material things?
Yeah, actually, those things are not material. So, one of the things, the main difference between the material world and the spiritual world is that in the material world, we're using everything for our own satisfaction. But in the spiritual world, everything is used for Krishna's pleasure. So, let's say you come across you're walking across the banks of the Yamuna and you pick up a diamond. The first thing the devotees will do is they will go and offer it to Krishna. Yeah, they will make sure that Krishna is very nicely decorated. Now, as a side effect of that, Krishna may give it to you or they may not give it to you, but the devotee doesn't care. So it's a very nice point that in the material world, we have to give up our sense of ownership and our sense of attachment to all of the riches that are there in this world, because ultimately, these riches, they don't belong to us. We can try to keep all of these riches with us. One of the things is we want to keep Lakshmi with us, but we don't want to keep Krishna, or we don't want to keep Vishnu with us. The main thing is we need to make sure that we offer Lakshmi to Vishnu. We need to offer Sita to Ram. If we try to separate Sita and Rama, it will be a disaster. Surpanakha tried to separate Rama. She wanted to just have Rama. Ravana tried to separate Sita. He wanted to just have Sita without Rama. And both of them ended up in a very bad place. Both of them had to suffer. So if we try to take material things for our own enjoyment, then we will suffer. The main thing is whatever we do, we take it and we give it to Krishna. So one of the verses in in the scriptures is Krishnarthe Akhila Cheshtam, which means that whatever we do, whatever we eat, Krishna says also. Let's say you want to eat something. The first thing we do is we offer it to Krishna. You make sure that Krishna eats it. That is the whole process of offering bhoga and eating prasadam. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yat karosi, yat juhosi, yat ashnashi, dadasi yat. Yat tapasyasi konteya, Yat kurushva madarpanam. So Krishna says that whatever you do, whatever tapasya you perform, whatever you eat, whatever work you perform, do everything for me. And if you do this, ultimately your heart will get purified. Why? Because in this material world, you know why we are in this material world? The reason we are in this material world is because we have a disease. That disease is known as the eye disease. Not this eye disease, the letter I disease. So I disease means we are selfish. We want to enjoy ourselves. That is why we are in this material world. Whereas the people who are there in the spiritual world, they are completely selfless. They want to only serve Krishna. So when that mentality is there and when that mentality is developed, then we are able to go back home, back to Godhead in the spiritual world. But that process can be, you may say, well, that sounds like a very difficult thing to do. But it's not really. If you follow the ABC process nicely, then that can purify our heart. It's explained Cheto Darpana Marjanam. This whole process, if we follow nicely, by associating with the devotees, by reading spiritual books, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, if we follow these nicely, that will slowly and surely cleanse our heart, and we will ultimately become selfless also. And then we become eligible to go back home, back to Godhead in the spiritual world. Then whenever you see rubies or anything, the first thought won't come that, I want to wear this ruby. The thought that comes is, oh, this ruby will look very nice on Krishna. I need to offer it to Krishna. So then we become eligible to go back home, back to Godhead, to the spiritual world. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it raises one more question in my mind.
Yeah, sure.
But the Bhagavad Gita is written by Lord Krishna, right?
It was spoken by him, but yes,
Yeah.
yes,
It's been said to Arjuna by Lord Krishna, is it?
yes.
So, he says that in the spiritual world, there's rubies and everything, which when you enter the spiritual world, you won't be selfish and you won't want to have it all to yourself, but
Yes.
you will want to give it to me. I understand the God saying that you should instill faith in me, but I don't understand that doesn't it? It's just for me. I'm not disrespecting.
Yeah,
you,
no,
but
that's
I just
fine.
want to understand.
You can ask.
But it sounds like
Krishna is being selfish.
Yeah, doesn't it like sound like that when he asks you to give up all your material things and
Yeah,
come
that's
to
a fair question.
come to this spiritual world
Hmm.
and look at rubies and everything and give
Yeah.
it to Krishna?
Yeah, that's fine. That's a fair enough objection. So then you have to understand the nature of God and nature of human beings.
What is that?
Yeah, so what is the nature of God? What is the nature of human beings? So God is the one who can purify others also. We don't have that ability. We don't have that capacity. First of all, God is in complete control. Krishna is in complete control. We are not in complete control. So Krishna could have said, you should take everything that is there in the spiritual world. You should take all of the offerings and offer it to the supreme most person. Krishna could have said that. But who is the supreme most person? It happens to be Krishna. So he has to say, as a matter of truth, that ultimately you have to take all of these things and you have to offer it to me. So if it was someone else, Krishna would have said, take these and offer them to the other person. But it happens to be Krishna, so he has to speak the truth. And that is why in the last line of the purport that we read today, it is said that even great scholars and great authorities like Narada, Asita, Devala and Vyasa, they all also confirm that whatever Krishna is saying is ultimately true. So the nature of God is completely different and the nature of human beings is completely different. Human beings, when they try to enjoy something, they get entangled. Like there's an example that's given. Like imagine there is a web. Let's say walking through a forest and there is a web. On the web, you will see that there is a spider that can move around wherever it wants. But whichever insect goes and lands on the web, it gets stuck. The insects are like us. If we try to enjoy something or if we try to take something for ourselves, we will get stuck. But God is like the spider. He is above this world and He's the one who creates it. So He's the one who can walk around everywhere and He doesn't get stuck. Krishna does not need our offering. Krishna does not need all the rubies. Ultimately, they all belong to Him anyways. So Krishna says that by giving something to Him, by offering food to Him, by giving our activities to Him, we become purified. So the ultimate reason why Krishna demands that we do something for Him is for our purification, not for Him. He has everything already. He is self-satisfied. He is Atmarama. He doesn't need anything from us. But the reason He asks us to surrender something to Him is our heart will get cleansed. We will get rid of this I and my tendency that I want to enjoy. I am the supreme enjoyer. We get rid of that tendency by offering something to Krishna. But Krishna doesn't gain anything from our offering to Him. I hope that makes sense. If you're not satisfied, we can discuss after the class because now we have time for Aarti. And I would recommend you take one Bhagavad Gita also, but we'll discuss that afterwards. So, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Hare Krishna. So, we'll just stand up for Aarti now.